Wine Enthusiast Magazine, this is the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. I'm Executive Editor Susan Kostrava. New year, new format. We're kicking off 2018 with an excitingly different taste and feel as we take a look at wine and wellness.
If there's a Venn diagram of the people that practice yoga and that drink wine, I think that the overlap would be pretty substantial.
Hitting the mat and pouring a glass. We talk with the founder of New York's Yoga Unwined about the intersection of vinyasa and vino. Plus,
there's so many people that say, well, he can't be a master of wine, he doesn't even drink, and so on. And my only response to that is get over it.
A renowned master of wine talks about taking his last drink and continuing a career in the industry. And if a little detox is among your New Year's resolutions, we'll show you how to do it stylishly and deliciously with mocktails.
Mocktails, or as we like to call them, cocktails that don't make me a better dancer.
Right.
It's all coming up on the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. Blue Apron Wine. Yes, wine. If Blue Apron could make home cooking cool again, why not the Wine Club? Blue Apron only seeks out best-of-breed wines, including Uvaggio, a regular enthusiast editor's choice pick. Most other wine clubs just send you cheap reds and whites dressed up with fanciful labels. Only Blue Apron Wine has some of the world's best winemakers working with them exclusively. Get $25 off your first shipment of 6 wines at blueapron.com/corkscrew. "2018 is here, and for us, the new year brings more than just a new calendar. It brings a whole new approach to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. Thanks to your feedback, each and every episode will bring you more stories, more conversations, and more of the best and brightest personalities from the worlds of wine, beer, and spirits, plus restaurants, travel, and entertaining. Whether you're a wine novice, connoisseur, or somewhere in between, the new Wine Enthusiast Podcast is your go-to podcast for all things beverage and beyond. As we mentioned at the top of the show, today we're shining a spotlight on wellness. And of the 40-something% of Americans who make New Year's resolutions, most of them focus on health. You know, eating better foods, getting more exercise, maybe drinking a little less. If you're among those looking to detox after December's revelries, you're in luck, because more and more top-notch bartenders are taking their savvy with spirits and applying it to non-alcoholic libations. We sent Associate Digital Editor Dylan Garrett to the bar at Peach's Shrimp and Crab, a contemporary American seafood eatery in Brooklyn. He spoke with bartender Chris Rue about what makes for a killer mocktail.
What do you think the building blocks are of a drink? How do you properly balance a drink, whether or not it has alcohol in it?
When I'm building a non-alcoholic mocktail-like drink, I try to think about the same way that you're building a cocktail, right? You have your spirit, you have your citrus, and then you have like your sugar, right? And so I try to think about it like that. Like, what am I going to replace this liquor with? And some people, when I give it to them, they're like, "Are you sure there's no alcohol in there?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's alcohol in there." You know, it's a very citrus, juicy, like style cocktail.
Yeah, you know, most great spirits too, or great cocktails, you kind of want to mix it in a way that nothing should taste boozy at the end of the day anyway. Because, I mean, one of the reasons someone's paying for you to mix them a drink is, you know, if they want to go and drink Georgie from a flask, they could just do that and not be paying the price for a cocktail. You're paying to have something that doesn't just taste like alcohol in a mixer.
Right. Whenever I mix my cocktails, I mix it where the balance to the spirit and the citrus and the sugar doesn't give you this overwhelming taste of like harsh liquor like on your tongue. But when I do the version cocktails, it works out perfect. You know, like you don't get that bite at all.
For those who aren't, you know, dedicated cocktail drinkers, most cocktails fall into 2 categories, right? Spirits forward or sours. Sour is basically anything with citrus in it. Yep. So, you know, your mojitos, your daiquiris, your, margaritas. Whereas anything spirit forward is going to be like a martini, an old fashioned.
Yep.
So when I'm making mocktails, it's really easy to just swap out alcohol for soda water or for some other ingredient when you're making a sour, because you're basically making a fruit punch. Yep. Just go heavier on the sour, a little lighter on the sweet.
Right.
What do you do if someone's a martini drinker or an old-fashioned drinker? Like,
So-
how do you give them something that's a little more on that savory kind of
So
side?
this is very, very hard, right? You know, because the leading ingredient is the spirit, right? So what I've done and what I do is I take a very aromatic stuff and herbs and all that stuff, right?
Okay.
Like cloves, cinnamon, like all that stuff, right? And so I'll boil it all the way down. I'll do sorrel, and I'll just heat that up. And the sorrel is really good for being like a very citrusy like kind of like thing. But if you just use the ingredients inside of it, and you don't add any citrus to it, you get this very aromatic tea-like kind of like beverage, right? And a lot of aromatic things can remind you of some booze, flavor profile-wise, right? And so what I do to make it more like one of those old-fashioned style cocktails is I add some thickness to it, right? I add a little bit of maple syrup, or I'll add like a really, really like bitter medicinal tea,
Right.
and so it's still thin on the taste, but you're getting a lot of flavor of the aromatics and stuff like.
I like that idea of using like tea as a thing. I actually never kind of thought of that as like a bittering agent can go for any kind of drink,
Tea's a really good way to go. A lot of that stuff is really good replacement, right? And a lot of people don't use it. Like there's like tree barks and there's so much stuff you can use, but you have to spend the time boiling all the stuff down, letting it reduce, and letting like the water take on the flavors of the ingredients that you're using. It may not have like the body, but you're getting the taste profile. You're getting as close to that as you would if it was like a regular like cocktail or martini. We don't do less, we do more. We really want people to feel like what we're giving you is just as good as the one with alcohol.
All right, so now we're going to do Chris making cocktails or mocktails.
So the first one we're going to make you guys is the Miss Jackson. It's the mocktail version of the Miss Jackson. So we buy a really, really good high quality blackberry puree. You know that right off the bat. I make a fresh lemonade, all fresh ingredients.
So you really want to stress that fresh juices are the way to go, not just for, it should be for cocktails and for mocktails, but that's what really...
That's the best. That's the best way to go because all the concentrated stuff, it's too sugary, right? And so when you use fresh ingredients, you really get to taste really good quality stuff, and it's better for you. So the first one we're making for you, we're going to do about 3 ounces of house-made lemonade, and then we're going to do a little bit of extra lemon juice on top of it, 3/4, and then 3/4 of simple syrup, and we're going to shake it really, really hard. Shake it. You want to pour that in the glass over some fresh ice. And then you want to top that with blackberry puree. And there you are, ladies and gentlemen, the Miss Jackson mocktail.
Oh, that's delicious, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
So, Chris, thank you so much for having us here today.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you,
Peaches,
guys.
Marietta. Man, these drinks are great.
Thank you, man.
All right.
You can find Chris's recipe for the Miss Jackson on our website, winemag.com/podcast. And have you had a mocktail that knocked your socks off? If so, we want to hear about it. Send us an email. Our address is podcast@winemag.com. That's podcast@winemag.com. What comes to mind when you think about yoga? Lots of deep breathing, maybe? Meditation? Poses like upward and downward facing dog? Well, if you attend a certain yoga class in New York City, you'll hear about and do all of those things.
Inhale back to center, and as you exhale, take that over to the left.
But you'll also hear
this. We're going to come into cactus arms, but this time we're going to take wine glass arms. So our palms are going to be facing each other. Maybe even want to make champagne flute arms since we're doing a sparkling wine class.
That's right. Wine glass arms and champagne flute arms in a sparkling wine yoga class. It's just one of many classes in Yoga Unwined. And yes, that's Unwind as in UNWINED. Yoga Unwined is the brainchild of Morgan Perry, who brings together yoga poses and wine facts and ends each class with what she calls a meditative wine tasting. Digital managing editor Marina Vitage spoke with Morgan about how she believes vinyasa and vino go hand in hand.
I started practicing yoga about 7 years ago. I really just wanted to incorporate some kind of workout or movement into my day. And I would take these lunchtime classes at a yoga studio in the building where my office was. And I really got into it. I figured it would help me build some strength, maybe help my posture from sitting at a desk all day. And that's really what it did. But it also did something else. It helped me to chill out. It helped calm me down when I was having a stressful day. And it was really exactly what I needed.
So you had a kind of one of those high energy, high stress jobs.
Yes, exactly. I worked for a creative communications agency, and it was a great, great job, but definitely comes along with a little bit of stress.
How did you get into wine?
At the agency, I worked on the wine and spirits accounts for about 10 years, actually, but I didn't really fall in love with wine until I went to Chile. And when I was in the vineyards and in the wineries, I got to see the winemaking process, and I was just amazed, and the winemaker's passion was so contagious. And it actually transformed the way I did my job too, because then I was able to come back and tell these stories to the people I was talking to journalists about the vineyard and the winemakers and everything I'd learned. And I started taking wine classes because I really wanted to learn more. And so I started doing that in my free time.
So you really spent some time to learn a lot about wine.
Yes, exactly. And I'm still continuing my education today.
It never ends, right? Isn't that the way it goes?
It can't end. There's too much information, and new things are being discovered, as you know, and there's too many wines to taste and not enough time.
So you sort of immerse yourself in this wine education, and at the same time are finding this escape in yoga. Did you ever think the two would come together?
No, definitely not.
And how did that happen?
I went to yoga teacher training, and this was an immersion course that I did in the Dominican Republic. And during that time, we had kind of a final exam, if you will. And the final exam was teaching our fellow aspiring yoga teachers a class that we created ourselves. And I decided to try to incorporate wine. I didn't really know how I was going to do it, but I ended up talking about wine during the class. And I had no idea that people would be so receptive to it. And several people started asking, "Are you going to do this when you get back to New York?" And the thought really had not crossed my mind, but that's really what sparked the idea to create Yoga Unwined.
How exactly do you fit the approach of wine into your yoga class?
I share facts about wine with my students while they're holding certain poses for a few breaths. So for example, I'll say, get into Warrior 2. I make sure that you're in Warrior 2 properly. And then I say, okay, we're going to be here for 3 breaths. Then I give you a fact about wine. Then I break that up with a few flows, vinyasa style flows. So there's not too much talking. We move 1 breath per movement during that time. And then after the yoga class, the students lay on their mat for shavasana, or corpse pose, where you really just kind of lay there. And that allows your body and your mind to absorb everything that's happened in the class. So after that, I lead the group through a tasting of 2 wines. So it's a comparative tasting. It's 2 wines that we've just talked about during class. And it's really cool because we're pulling in the information they just learned, so they're able to take what they learned on the mat and apply it directly into their glass.
The people who are taking your class, how much or how little do they know about wine before they sign up for the class?
It varies. I would say, generally speaking, most people have very little knowledge of wine, or they come into class and say, "Oh, I love rosé," but that's really it. Or, "Oh, I love Sauvignon Blanc. It's my favorite white wine," but they don't know much about it. And people come up to me after class and are constantly telling me how much they learned. One of my favorite stories happened at our holiday party, where I had a couple students come up to me after class and tell me, "Oh my gosh, I learned so much." And one girl said, "I just got back from South Africa and I visited a bunch of wineries, and I actually learned more in your class than I did."
That is such a compliment. Wow.
It made me feel really, really good.
There is this really important element about yoga, and some yogis follow this philosophy that alcohol is on the list of things to be avoided. If you're a true yogi,
yoga and yogis have both evolved a lot in the last several hundred years, and I think a lot of those texts were written in like the 15th century or something. And also, yoga used to be something that was practiced by a pretty small group of people. And recently it's been democratized in the US. And I think the last number I saw was something like over 36 million Americans are practicing yoga. From my experience, it seems like there's a lot more yogis in the US today that drink alcohol than those that might abstain from alcohol. And I always say, like, if there's a Venn diagram of the people that practice yoga and that drink wine, I think that the overlap would be pretty substantial. So in my mind, I don't see it as an issue, but, I think everyone has their own opinion. And I created Yoga Unwined really as a way to make both yoga and wine approachable to everyone. So if I can get people moving on their mat because they're curious about wine and we end with a tasting and that's why they're there, then I'm introducing them to yoga and I'm happy about that too.
Time for a break, but when we get back, a renowned master of wine talks about giving up booze and staying in the business. Blue Apron Wine. Yes, wine. Awesome wine, in fact. In a head-to-head taste test of several wine clubs, Bloomberg recently wrote, Blue Apron is the clear winner, way more sophisticated in taste. Just as Blue Apron doesn't compromise on the quality of ingredients in their meal boxes, Blue Apron Wine only works with incredible vineyards and winemakers, such as Vengi in Napa, Mount Beautiful in New Zealand, and regular enthusiast high scorer Uvaggio. Every amazing wine is just $10 per bottle. Get $25 off your first shipment at blueapron.com/corkscrew. Terms and conditions apply. All orders are handled by Blue Apron Wine, Napa, California. Welcome back to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. I'm Susan Kostrava. Today, we're talking about wine and wellness. And the next person we'll hear from knows a heck of a lot about both. Tim Haney is one of the first 2 Americans to earn the prestigious title Master of Wine. But here's the thing. It's been 25 years since he had his last drink. But abstaining from alcohol didn't slow down Tim's burgeoning career. These days, the professionally trained chef is known throughout the world as a flavor maven. He's lectured in more than 24 countries about balancing the flavors of food and wine. And you'll find his balancing techniques in thousands of restaurants and hotel outlets around the globe. I recently spoke with Tim about his life and career. I began by asking him how he first entered the worlds of wine and food.
Well, growing up in beautiful Miami, Florida, my dad was a member of Chaîne de Rôtisseurs, and so his interest in wine and gastronomy led to my interest in wine and gastronomy. So at the tender age of 14, I started reading wine books and learning all about wine. And I had found a really great niche. Joel Butler and I were the first 2 Americans in history to become masters of wine. And I've been in the wine industry, I hate to say it, but over 40, 50 years now. The interesting thing is I'm sitting in Phoenix, where 25 years ago, I took my last formal drink, or my last drink, really. I decided to do this test, as so many people do. I'll dry out for a month, or I'll try this out. And so I had a glass of Meridian Chardonnay at the Marriott Mountain Shadows with a group of people I was working with at Behringer at the time. And so I actually took my last drink on December 16th. And then the following February, I decided to enter a formal rehabilitation program, a 28-day program. My knowing that I was an alcoholic goes back a long, long time before I actually stopped drinking. And one of the very fascinating aspects of that is when I got to that point in time, can I continue in the wine business? The counselor that I had said, would you be willing to leave the business? And I said, yeah, I would, honestly. I know this is a problem. I need to address it. And he said, there's a possibility you can stay in the business. And the only reason I'm saying that is because you didn't hesitate, and it seemed very authentic when you said you're willing to leave the business. And you might have to, But it's when people resist or unwilling to take whatever steps necessary to address their problem that it continues to be a problem. So I was kind of at a juncture already, and now I was looking at, okay, if I'm not going to drink, now what? And so in that point in time, I decided, what if I spent the rest of my career in my passion? I mean, I love this industry. I love wine. I love the history. I love the traditions. But I knew so much of what we say and do today is supposedly based on the history and tradition of wines, and it's really not. We've warped things, we've misinterpreted things, we've lost sight of what wine actually used to be in the European culture, where they never really matched wine and food. And so I thought, why don't I now focus on consumers, and instead of me positioning myself to be the end-all of wine evaluation, and why don't I see if I can understand consumers and consumer behavior and see if I can actually do something constructive for the industry? You know, it's kind of curious also. There's so many people that say, well, he can't be a master of wine. He doesn't even drink and so on. And my only response to that is get over it. If you're going to be a pharmacist, you don't have to try all the drugs.
That's it for today's Wine Enthusiast podcast. We heard from Associate Digital Editor Dylan Garrett, Digital Managing Editor Marina Vitage, Managing Editor Lauren Buzzio, and me, Executive Editor Susan Kostrava. The Wine Enthusiast podcast is produced by Sheeran Shim, LLC, and Executive Producer Marina Vitage. We release a brand new episode every other week, and we don't want you to miss any. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please, write a review. We'd love to hear what you think of the show. Stay in touch with us by following Wine Enthusiast Magazine on Facebook and Twitter, and by visiting our website, winemag.com/podcast. I'm Susan Kostrava. See you next time.